meeting, committee meeting is 5:31. Jamie, can you call the roll for us, please?
Certainly. Tammy Ray,
I'm present from the city of Kalamazoo.
Margaret Wilson, James Martin,
Present.
Megan Buwalda,
Present.
Amina Shakir, Candace Howell. Nope, you're on mute, Candace.
I'm here.
Thank you. Betsy Farner, Chelsea Vieri.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. So we'd like to move to approval of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda, or is there any additions, deletions, changes?
So moved.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay, the agenda is approved. So has everyone reviewed the September minutes? Is there a motion to approve, or are there any changes?
I'll move to approve.
Chelsea Vieri will second.
Okay, it's been properly moved and supported. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
Aye.
Sorry, is there any opposition? Okay, the motion carries. So now we move to citizens' comments on non-agenda items. Is there any public comments?
There are no public comments at this time.
Thank you. So we'll move to old business. Is there a report from the application committee?
I think Margaret had some updates. Jamie, I think you were back and forth with her on that a little bit. Some of the numbers. I think there was a change in that, but other than that, I think the application is ready to go. Is that correct?
The only thing that was still under consideration was the calendar of dates in the application. There was discussion as to whether those should be included, and Margaret had mentioned that in her email today.
Okay. So I think that's it, unless Chelsea, was there anything else that you thought of?
No, but I think I was trying to pull up the pages, but I think specifically the calendar dates that we're questioning is the current application gives a full time frame, not only of the review process, but tentative dates of when the money could be allotted. And we weren't sure with assigning dates if that would be outside what the application committee would have for a time frame.
Yeah, there was some, I guess the application itself is due December the 3rd. Is that correct?
Yes. Yes, it
so
is.
I guess the point, and I was a little bit confused, and maybe someone can help me out. It was whether or not someone wants to check and see if their application is complete beforehand. There's an opportunity to do that. Is that correct?
Correct. And that was one of the dates that Margaret suggested a change on via email today, because that was listed as December 3, but she suggested that if people would like to submit their application for completeness to city staff, that be done by November 19.
Okay. So if applicants want to have their application reviewed for completeness, they would need to do that by November the 19th. They don't have to do that. That's an option.
Correct.
The application itself is due December the 3rd. Is that correct?
That is right. Yep.
Okay. All right. And those dates are fine with me if that works for everybody else.
And we will update that information on our website and share that information publicly as well with those updates.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Chelsea, anything else you had?
Well, it's still just if we want to include, I guess it's more of a group comment, if the dates that we weren't sure if we wanted to include were the dates of the applicant presentation. So last year they would begin between January 20th and February 7th. And then the dates for the 30-day comment period. And then the dates for the public hearing. If we wanted to just use what was given in 2021 and roll it to 2022, just making sure it falls on, I guess, not a weekend. But no, everything other than that, the application's all ready to go. It's just a couple dates that we weren't sure about.
Okay. Is that something, I don't think we discussed that, at least not that I recall. Is that something that during the training would be done with the folks, or is that how does that need to work, Chris, as far as the time frame?
I can give I can update it and just look at the calendar. Like as mentioned, just make sure none of those dates fall on a weekend.
Okay.
And just update it in the application. For the dates, make sure they coincide for 2022. What's in there right now are just dates from 2021. So
yeah.
But yeah, I can update it for this application.
And what
that would be perfect.
What was the time frame from last year? Was it between January what and February something?
January 20th and February 7th for the application or the applicant presentations.
Okay. So
and then February 11th as the day that the application committee submits their recommendations.
Yeah, that sounds fine to me. I don't know. Anybody else? I mean, something, as long as it just modify the dates to make sure they're on a
Yeah, you can just modify the dates. If you guys are fine with that kind of timeline, then.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
I think that's good. February 11th is a Friday, and the 20th through the 7th gives us a good time for accommodating schedules.
Perfect. Thank you. That was the question.
And that's it for us.
Everything else is ready to go.
Thank you. So we'll move now to the presentation from United Way.
Thank you all for having me. Let me get my screen set up to share real quick. Oh, do I need permission?
Thinking yes.
Yeah.
IT, can you assist?
Should be all set now. Sorry.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. Well, let me quickly introduce myself. I'm Carrie Bosch, and I'm with the Continuum of Care at the United Way of the Battle Creek and Kalamazoo region. I'm the HMIS systems administrator there, and I will explain what that means as we go along today. But again, I just want to thank you for having me. Please feel free to interrupt at any time if you have questions. I'll also note, I've noticed on Zoom sometimes if I'm speaking for quite a while, my voice will become garbled. I'm not sure what's going on with my system. Haven't figured that out yet. But if that happens, please do let me know and I'll try to fix that for you all. All right. So just a quick introduction to HMIS. So HMIS stands for the Homeless Management Information System. And it's a local system that's designed to collect client level data on the provision of homeless services. And we do that for a number of reasons. Number one is to coordinate client care in a way that minimizes burden for the client. So a client's record can follow them from agency to agency as they seek services in our county. And hopefully that means that they have to do less to kind of share information about themselves and their story. It also allows us then to examine system and program performance and use that information to inform planning within our community about the services we need. It also has impacts at the state and national level. This is a HUD required system, and we use a statewide system, which I'll get into in a minute, which means that the entire state of Michigan is able to use the data that we collect here in our county, as well as the HUD to report to Congress at a national level in order to inform planning there. I linked a statewide report and some national reports in my PowerPoint there. In case you're interested, I can share that with you all. HMIS also helps us meet funder reporting requirements. So HMIS is a requirement of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which we receive a lot of our funds, and Michigan State Housing Development Authority also has some requirements for us with HMIS, again, leading up to that statewide examination of our homeless service system. So like I said, HUD requires every continuum of care to operate in HMIS, and they set specific standards for our governance, privacy, and data. So like I said, Michigan has a statewide HMIS system. It's slightly unique in that way. Not every state does it this way. But this means that the entire state uses the same software to operate one single HMIS for the entire state. Governance of Michigan HMIS is shared then between MISHDA, MICA, which is the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness, and us locally in our COC, and that's outlined in a joint governance charter. So MICA is responsible for managing the contract with our software vendor, defining basic protocols and operating procedures, and providing some basic training and support. But then it's my role as the HMIS systems administrator to kind of bolster that and customize it for our community. So we're responsible for the local implementation of our HMIS, including meeting all of those reporting requirements, managing sharing agreements between the agencies that participate, and setting, additional standards. So our Michigan HMIS operates as a tree structure. So we have the HMIS system overseeing the entire kind of branch of that tree. And then we have in our COC our own then branch that we have control over. So I sit here at that Kalamazoo COC level, and I oversee the agencies that participate in HMIS, and each of those agencies then has numerous programs or projects that feed into our HMIS system. So the clients that are involved in those projects are tracked through our HMIS. Currently, we have a number of agencies that use HMIS within the county. So HUD requires the agencies that receive funding through them for homeless services to use our HMIS. That includes Housing Resources Incorporated, Integrated Services of Kalamazoo, Catholic Charities Diocese of Kalamazoo, Volunteers of America, Michigan, and then Community AIDS Resources and Education Services, which runs a housing opportunities for persons with AIDS program. They utilize HMIS, but they are not in that tree structure of ours within our COC. So we are able to receive some data from them. That's generally anonymous data to protect the privacy of those clients. But we don't have jurisdiction over that usage. We also have a number of other agencies in the county that use HMIS that are not required to by their funder. That includes Kalamazoo Gospel Ministries, Open Doors Kalamazoo, And the Kalamazoo CRC ourselves uses HMIS whenever we have a pilot program. Right now we're piloting a rentable security deposit assistance program that is funded by the city of Kalamazoo, and we're using HMIS for that program. New agencies can work with me, the system administrator, to join HMIS. And so our goal is to have as complete of a universal uptake of HMIS as possible, so that we really have an understanding of what's going on at the entire system level. So like I said, data then is shared between agencies about the services that a client engages in. However, our HMIS users must follow really strict privacy practices in order to protect that client level data. Those practices are in line with HIPAA. All clients are asked to sign a release of information which dictates how information can be shared and what agencies that information can be shared with. So a client can choose to keep their information private so that it only is shared with the agency that they are working directly with. Data sharing between the agencies in our continuum of care is outlined in a sharing agreement, which we keep. So agencies must sign off on this agreement. And that agreement then, of course, is reflected in the client release of information. So all of that must be done before any client level data can be shared between agencies. And again, as the system administrator, I oversee the entire system of HMIS for our COC. And I can also use that data from all agencies, regardless of sharing, to generate aggregate and de-identified reports to help us inform planning at our entire system level. Is there any questions so far?
Yes. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. And please forgive me. I am in the middle of a coffee shop. So you mentioned that you guys share that data with the state and federal level. What is that? Is it just pure data, or is there any context provided with that data?
Good question. Yeah. So the state, in collaboration with MICA, can, they have some ability to look at pretty much anything they like in terms of data. The biggest thing that they use it for is an annual report that I linked in one of those initial slides, which really is just looking at the extent of homelessness and some of the demographics of homelessness across the state. I will actually be going over the data from our COC that is used to inform that report. So it's generally de-identified data, and the state will come sometimes and ask for additional context. For example, this year we across the state saw decreases in homelessness in 2020 compared to 2019. And so the state reached out and asked for a little bit of context of from the COC's perspective, what was happening there. HUD has some specific reports that we're required to submit to them as part of our funding processes. The biggest thing that happens there in terms of federal planning is our HMIS data is used to compile an annual homelessness assessment report to Congress. And there's a number of factors that go into that report. And then Congress uses that essentially in determining funding priorities for homelessness.
Okay, thank you. I just get frustrated in just bigger picture here. I get frustrated with, I think, the lack of understanding that a lot of our state and federal electeds have as it pertains to, what's going on directly on front lines. And so I'm just curious. I guess I've never really had an understanding of the data that they were receiving. And so to see it from this standpoint, I think it's piqued my interest to look into a little further. but thank you.
Yeah, so the state, MISTA works closely with the Michigan Coalition Against Homelessness for any use of HMIS data. And they're the agency that's really the umbrella agency over our entire HMIS system. So they really understand what goes into the data and what that means. Any other questions? All right, well, we can get into what data are tracked in HMIS, and I'm going to try to keep this simple and high level for you all. So HUD sets some very specific data standards for what data we as a COC are required to track, and how each kind of data element is defined and when it needs to be collected, et cetera. So I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of it, but I'll give you an overview of the type of information that we collect and track in HMIS, and kind of how we can use that. So first, HMIS isn't just good for that, client level information. It also gives us some great information about the extent of our homeless service system and kind of our capacity to serve clients. So using that tree structure, provider pages are set up in HMIS for every specific program or project that's run by an agency that serves homeless clients using HMIS. So these provider pages themselves capture data about that project that are useful to us when we're looking at our homeless service system. That includes the project type as defined by HUD, so we can look at how many street outreach programs do we have versus shelters versus rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, each which has a different model as defined by HUD. We also track the operating start and end date of those projects so that we can look back and in time, again, just to look at our homeless service system as projects start and end over time. We track the funding sources for those projects, as well as, I think most importantly, information for projects that provide shelter or housing of any type, the bed and unit inventory for that project. So what types of households does that project serve? Is it families with children or single adults or unaccompanied youth? Is it a veteran-only projects, et cetera? Whether those that shelter or housing is offered in a facility or if it's voucher-based, and how many clients are able to be served. What is the capacity of that program in terms of the number of units available and the number of beds. That information we use every year in a report to HUD. That's a housing inventory count that again just looks at our ability to serve folks in our community in shelters or housing programs.
Carrie, real quick. So
Yes.
with the data tracking that we do here in Kalamazoo County on the homeless platform, pretty much it's going to you to share with the community and with HUD and with the state. Is that correct?
Yeah, so using that tree structure, every agency has kind of purview over the data for their own agency. So they could share with someone, data from HMIS about their specific programs and projects. Then yes, I am able to share information for our entire system. And that includes, it's my responsibility to compile those reports for our funders.
All right, thank you.
And so, yes, if there's ever, that also means if there's ever, if the city or another stakeholder has a question that could be answered with HMIS data, I would be the person to kind of direct that question to. So then we also, the main data that we collect is at that client level. So we collect a number of pieces of information about the client's demographics and other information. And I separated these out into universally collected, which means that any program using HMIS is required to collect these pieces of information, or generally collected, which means they're most often collected, but some specific projects may not collect these particular pieces of data. So that includes date of birth that we can use to determine a client's age, their race and ethnicity. Unfortunately, these are, HUD defined, so they are very particular about the categories that are used for race and ethnicity, gender identity, veteran status, disability status. Generally collected, most often collected, is information about income and non-cash benefits that the household may receive. So we track the different sources of income, as well as how much income is received from each source, information on the household's health insurance, information about what specific disabilities or chronic health conditions each individual may have, as well as whether that disability or health condition is ongoing and interfering with their ability to maintain housing, information on the household's domestic violence history, and pregnancy status.
Carrie, I have a question.
Yes.
How is the data actually collected, and who is responsible for that?
Yeah, so generally case managers will collect this information as part of their work with the client. So when a client comes to an agency, there's an intake assessment that's done with the individual that they're working with. And then each agency operates a little bit differently. Sometimes that person that collects the information is the one that goes in and puts it into our HMIS system. Sometimes there's a data person at that agency that collects all of the information and puts it for the agency. But this information is collected as part of the work that's being done with the client.
Okay, so as an agent, a member agency comes in contact, that's where that data is collected. Is that correct?
So an agency would start working with a client. They would sign off on the release of information, and the agency would collect this information as part of their, beginning work with a client. They also will do, updates along the way as they continue to work with the client, and then they'll put that information into the HMIS system.
Okay, thank you.
Carrie, pardon.
Well, just a follow-up question to James' question is, if a person doesn't sign off on release of information, is that data then not shared, or certain data is shared, but certain information is not shared? How does that work?
Yeah, so the person entering the data has the ability to just completely lock down that client record so that it's not shared at all. In that case, it would be like any other, case management software that a agency might use just for themselves.
So kind of to follow up on that, my question would be, is there any way to estimate the percentage of people, because you have an idea of how many are served by a program and you have how many reported, is there kind of a capture of data of how many people choose to not share their case file or the information, or?
That's a great question. And honestly, I would imagine that I, as an administrator, can create a report to give me that information, but it's not something I've ever looked at, to be honest. It's generally clients, it's not very common for a client not to sign off on the sharing. It does really help to minimize kind of the burden on a client as they move from agency to agency, because they don't have to repeat information. So generally the main reasons that a client, and we do also protect certain information within the system. So for example, we do collect social security number, but that information is not necessarily shared from agency to agency, at least not the full social security number. That's just used for the system to be able to make sure that we're deduplicating client records. So generally the only reason, or the main reason, that a client would choose not to share information is if there was perhaps an individual working at another agency within the community that they didn't want that person to have access to their information, and so they would ask for their record to be closed from that agency.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions? Okay, so we'll go, oh, we have a hand raised.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No problem.
You mentioned that the identifying tracking number that you're using for people is their social security number. Is that, did I understand that or did I misunderstand that?
No, so the tracking number that we use within the system, each client is assigned a unique HMIS ID number. We do, on the back end of the system, we do collect date of birth, full name, social security number, and that's used on the back end as reports are being run, to deduplicate those reports, so that if a client is entered into the system under more than one record, it would be able to catch that. But that information is not used to track, agency to agency, and it's not the number that a agency would use. Like, they would use the HMIS ID number to pair that client's record to that client.
So that, what do you do when you have people who do not have social security numbers?
Yeah, so that's not a problem. So HUD does, social security number is one of those, HUD required aspects that we collect, but it's absolutely not a problem if a client does not know, does not want to share, or does not have a social security number. Then at that point, it's just left blank. We also track, we generally track the reason that there's not a social security number, but we don't track if it's because the client doesn't have one. In that case, we would just mark it as client doesn't know. There's no, a client can still receive all the services regardless of whether they have a social security number or not, and regardless of whether or not they choose to share their social security number.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. So we'll go on to the data that's collected that's associated with the client's or household's program participation. So for each program or project, we collect information on the date that that client or household began and ended participation with a specific project. So for example, the date that a client first stayed at an emergency shelter, and the date that the client left that emergency shelter, or the date that a client was first connected with an street outreach worker, and then the date that that client became housed and was unenrolled from street outreach because they were no longer homeless. We also collect information on household composition in terms of as it relates to program participation. So we group households together as they participate in a project. So if there was mother with 3 children staying in a shelter, that would be noted. Those records would all be associated with each other in the system. And we would be able to say this individual is the head of household, and these 3 individuals are children in the household. We also capture the individual's prior living situation. So where that individual was living directly before seeking services. So that might be if an individual was living, on the streets in a vehicle or another place not meant for human habitation directly prior to seeking shelter. And then we record that individual's exit destination when they end participation with the project. So did they exit to housing? Did they exit to another homeless service program? Did they exit, to back into another homelessness destination, perhaps another shelter? So those are the universally collected data elements for program participation. Then we also most often collect more detailed information on the household's homeless history. And that generally goes back for the past 3 years. So how many times that individual had been homeless in the past 3 years, how many months out of the past 3 years that individual had been homeless, et cetera. We also have the ability to document the needs that that household or client faces while enrolled in the program, and then match those with the services that that household received from the project. So if a client had a need for transportation and the project provided a gas card or a bus token, that would be documented within the system. For permanent housing programs, so those are programs that provide assistance in receiving permanent housing. So that's generally a rapid rehousing program, a permanent supportive housing program, or another housing program. We also record that date that that client moved into the housing that was associated with that program. That helps us track how long it takes for a client to obtain housing when they're working with those projects. And then again, additional data might be collected depending on the type of the program. So youth providers collect a lot more information about educational background, family situation, things like that. Did I hear a question?
Carrie, I had a question in regards to the compilation of all of this data. I assume you have the larger report, if you will, with all of the detail and all of the statistics and all of the percentages of folks that go back into homelessness after being placed and so on. How do you share that information, and who do you share that with?
Great question. And I'll get into a little bit of that. So I'll actually, coming up next is I'll start to share some of our data with you all. So in terms of those kind of performance metrics of, returns to homelessness, those types of outcomes, those are required to be shared with HUD every year with a system performance report that I'm required to compile. That one tracks 6 different outcomes across our entire system. We also are about to launch a public facing dashboard that will track length of time homeless, exits to permanent housing, and returns to homelessness. And that will be shared publicly. And we're kind of looking at more ways to share our data publicly. And we're also hoping to be more creative about how we're sharing data within our continuum of care partners to use for planning purposes.
Carrie, I just have a
there you go.
pardon.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Just a basic question. How is homelessness viewed? Is it like if you're just staying on a friend's couch, that's not a permanent address, but in the system, would that be considered homeless, or would that considered a suitable housing? Or
that's a really great question. So we, one of the, and it's not on here, but one of the the data elements that we collect is whether or not that household is considered homeless by HUD's definition, which I will get into it in a minute, or if that household is at risk of losing their housing, et cetera. So when I get into this data, looking at literal homelessness, which I will start to transition there, that is only including folks that are homeless by HUD's definition, which only includes individuals who are residing in an emergency shelter, safe haven, which we do not have any safe havens in our county, so that generally doesn't apply to us, transitional housing program, or are unsheltered, living in a vehicle, in the street, or a place not meant for human habitation. So that would not include an individual who is doubled up. It also would not include an individual who's in a housing program that is providing them with permanent housing, so a rapid rehousing program or a permanent supportive housing program, because at that point, that household is no longer homeless.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I got a question. On the tracking of homeless, like you said, in the street, how is that process done and when? Because I know there's a process. Could you explain that process?
Yeah, so we have street outreach programs that work directly with individuals who are living in unsheltered situations. And so just like any program that uses HMIS, when they go and work with a client, they would ask the client to sign that release of information and collect information that is then tracked in HMIS. Street outreach programs have some particular additional information that they're required to collect, kind of tracking their engagement with that client over time. Does that answer your question?
Yes. What the other part of the question is, what time of the year do they do it? Twice a year, once a year, multiple months? How does that work?
Yeah, so our street outreach programs are ongoing. So they would collect information on clients throughout the year and would enroll them in their street outreach program in HMIS. And generally those clients stay in the street outreach program until they either go to an emergency shelter, or they secure housing, or they go missing and are unable to be located. We do also have a yearly point in time count, which I think you might be referring to, and that's when we do a large count of our homeless, again, literal homeless population, which includes all individuals in shelters, transitional housing programs, and in a place not meant for human habitation. So that is a one-night count where we have individuals go out into the community, our street outreach workers and sometimes volunteers, to just do a literal count of the individuals that are homeless on that one particular night. The statistics that I'm about to share actually give an overview of the entire calendar year using that HMIS data. So while they may not include individuals that do not engage in any services, the data still provides a kind of broader picture than our point in time count data, because it takes into account the entire calendar year instead of one single night, when that one night could be, affected by weather or a range of other factors.
In the data you're about to show us, how is that data used this year with the city, the county, and with HUD for funding opportunities? Can you explain that when you go to the data as well?
Yeah, so the literal homeless count data that I'm about to show you is data that is actually used to inform the statewide report on homelessness. This particular data is not something that we're required to share with HUD. although I'm going to get a little bit into the weeds here. In our system performance measures, that those 6 measures that we're required to report to HUD every year, there's a kind of a similar, they capture a similar piece of information in that of our count throughout the year. But this information is really mainly used to be helpful to us as a community and as a service system to understand the extent of homelessness and as it changes year to year. Other questions?
Carrie, just one more, just to make sure I understand this correctly. If someone isn't active within the system for 3 years, then their profile would no longer exist, correct?
No. So the 3 years refers to when a client engages with a service or a program. They're generally asked about they're asked to look back on their homeless history for the past 3 years. But a client's record stays with them. So HUD requires us to maintain, I believe, 7 years worth of data. But our HMIS system right now goes back further than that.
So if someone has been in the system for more than 7 years, all that information would be retained on them if they chose to enter it?
Yes, I can't say that moving forward there won't be a decision made to purge old data of clients that haven't been active for at least the past 7 years, but generally that information is maintained.
Thank you so much. You're a wealth of information.
Other questions? All right. So this is a lot of information on one screen, but this is kind of a visualization of our literal homeless counts. So again, that's only individuals who are in an emergency shelter, transitional housing program, or place not meant for human habitation over the past 5 years. So we'll see this bottom column in orange is children and families. And I include the number in each box here for you to see. This yellow box here is adults and families. So if we look at the orange and yellow together, we would see the number of individuals who are in households with both adults and children. This dark blue box is single adults. And then this light blue box is unaccompanied youth age 18 to 24. Now, before 2018, this wasn't tracked as a separate category, so these individuals would be included in the single adult category here. Then there's the smallest, thankfully smallest category here on top is unaccompanied youth who are under the age of 18. I also then included this line graph on top, which includes the overall deduplicated homeless count for that year. Now, the reason this is different is because we know that individuals can move between household types. So an individual can be in a 2-parent household with children. That individual can separate from that household throughout the year and form a new household of just that individual as a single adult. So we see when we look at the number of people together in each household type, it adds up to more than that deduplicated account, number, which takes into account those individuals that may have moved from household type to household type throughout the year.
Carrie, I apologize if you addressed this already, but is this City of Kalamazoo Kalamazoo County, or is it Kalamazoo and Calhoun combined, or something else?
That's a great question, Megan, and I apologize. I should have covered this earlier. So our HMIS system is for the entire county of Kalamazoo. And so all of this data is county-wide, but only for our county.
All right, Carrie, your audio is getting a little shaky. I'm not sure, like you said you do something hopefully to adjust it. Or do you have to go out and come back in? I didn't know what the process would be.
Is it better now?
No.
I may need to leave and come back.
That's what I thought too. I've been in a meeting with you before, so.
Sometimes it works if I'm muted on mute. I will be right back and I apologize.
All right, no problem. All right. So good questions. Hopefully, please keep asking questions, as inquiring mind questions, because hopefully this is recorded and we can hopefully share this on our website, because we know the questions of homelessness, questions keeps coming in, and Commissioner Cunningham is here and he has questions. Hopefully he has some more so we can document this and share with the community through our website. Okay.
Yeah, I apologize, Carrie. I couldn't hear over the garble sound. Are you there now?
I am here. Is my audio better?
Yes, your audio is better. There you go.
Okay.
So we can continue. So Megan, can you re-ask your questions so Carrie can clarify that for us?
Yeah, also, thanks, you're resharing. My question was if this graph was City of Kalamazoo, County of Kalamazoo, or a mixture of Kalamazoo and Calhoun.
Yes, it's the entire county of Kalamazoo, but only Kalamazoo County. So I should have shared this earlier, so I'm glad you asked. Our HMIS system is for the entire county, but the Calhoun County is its own continuum of care. So even though I'm with the United Way of Battle Creek and Kalamazoo region, I'm with only the Kalamazoo County continuum of care, if that makes sense. So this is county-wide data.
Thank you.
All right, so you'll see here that there has been a fairly substantial decrease from 2019 to 2020. And this is one of those aspects that I mentioned earlier that the state actually came to us and asked for some context on these numbers. We did see statewide similar decreases across the state during the COVID-19 pandemic. And we really attribute this to a number of factors. Primarily is all of the work and funding that was poured into eviction diversion work, the SARA funds and other funding, all of the work that was done, by HRI, ISK, and Open Doors to keep folks in their homes over the year 2020. That really helped prevent new households from entering homelessness during the pandemic. We also did see a reduction in shelter capacity due to the safety concerns that were raised by the pandemic. And so when I break down these numbers, I do see that we had an increase in unsheltered homelessness at the same time that we had an overall decrease in homelessness in the county. You'll also see that the biggest kind of decrease across the board was in households with children. Are there any questions about these numbers? Or anything you'd like me to go more in depth on?
Is there any possibility that some of the lower count for 2020 is due to undercounting the population that wasn't able to access supports?
It's possible, yes. I would say there may have been a more of a hesitancy to access supports because of safety concerns. There might have also been, family or friends more likely to be willing to take in a household in order to, prevent the need for that household to be seeking services. So yes, those may be contributing factors, but I think that it's likely that the biggest factor, because of the number of households that we know were served by funds that were able to keep that household in their home, that is probably the biggest contributing factor. But I'm sure there were several, definitely. It'll definitely, it'll be, we'll see what's to come, particularly in 2022 and onward, as we kind of move out of the pandemic, or more of the effects of the pandemic are really kind of settling in. This is not necessarily a trend that I expect to continue to see long term. I'm sorry, I cut off a question there.
Oh, there's just a little one. Well, maybe not. So all the data is collected and it's contained. Do you ever get feedback from the organizations on the overall trends that they've been seeing, or things they've been experiencing, or how the questions suit their program?
How the questions being asked for
HUD, if they suit the program, or if they're noticing trends that can't necessarily or aren't necessarily captured by the questions?
Yeah. So we have a robust continuum of care, and we meet, very often. I convene a monthly data team meeting that consists specifically of HMIS users or other individuals that are interested in the data that we have for our system. And so, yes, those types of questions of, how is the data reflective or not reflective of what you're seeing on the ground at your agency is often discussed.
Thank you.
We'll move on to just a breakdown of our demographics by race, which I think is incredibly important for us to share and be aware of. So this first slide here has those 2020 numbers of literal homeless individuals separated out by race. So again, of that total population of 2,112, 56% identified as Black or African American, compared to only 40% white. A very small percentage identified as American Indian or Alaskan Native, or their race was not captured, or there were teeny numbers that were in a different racial category. So when we compare that to the demographics of the city of Kalamazoo and of Kalamazoo County as a whole, we see that there is a huge disparity there of, in this first blue column, individuals who are homeless who identify as a person of color, compared to Kalamazoo County or the city of Kalamazoo, versus individuals who identify as white over here. Again, just the demographics of our homeless population does not represent the demographics of our city or county, and individuals who identify particularly as Black or African or American are significantly more likely to be homeless in our community. And finally, with our annual count numbers, I just have some other statistics to share with you all, just to get a understanding of this population who has experienced homelessness throughout the course of 2020. So 33.5% of these individuals or households, really, this question is asked of adults in the household, indicated that they were a survivor of domestic violence. 42.3% have one or more disabling conditions. 30.4% have spent 12 or more months in emergency shelter or safe haven or place not meant for habitation over the past 3 years. 463 individuals total were identified as chronically homeless. That means that they have spent either 12 months or more of continuous homelessness, or 3 or more episodes of homelessness, totaling 12 or more months over the past 3 years. And they also have a disability. 88 individuals were identified as veterans, and 343 individuals were identified as seniors, which we define as age 55 or older. Any questions about this data or these numbers? So the last thing I wanted to share with you all was just some information, again, on those system level outcomes that we track. So for that public facing dashboard that I kind of hinted is something that's to come within our COC, we will be providing the public information with the number of days on average that households spend homeless, which is 176 days on average. The percentage of households that exit to a known permanent housing destination, that's 38% right now. When we look at our data, also important to point out that households with children were significantly more likely to exit to permanent destinations than single adult households. And we had a 9% return rate of returns to homelessness within 6 months of becoming housed. To come as I continue to work to analyze our data and to work with our agencies to support them in producing high quality data. So we'll have that public facing dashboard. We have an annual report. I linked to the 2020 annual report in the PowerPoint. We'll be doing more analyses focused on racial equity, and we'll have additional publicly available data briefs on topics that are of interest to our homeless service system. And any other questions?
Just real quick, the data and the facing dashboard will be on the United Way website? Or where will it be at?
It should be, yes. So that is something that the continuum of care just went through strategic planning. And that was an action step that was identified for us to do in that process. And so, yes, I believe that it will be on the continuum of care page of the United Way website, but we will definitely publicize that when it becomes available.
Okay, thank you.
I was curious if, with all the data that's collected, are there kind of programs that stand out as being more successful?
I'm not sure that I can comment on that tonight. I mean, we know that our
types of programs, or as long as it's being tracked and used in a helpful manner, I guess that would be my curiosity.
Yeah, I mean, we know that our permanent housing programs are kind of the most impactful when it comes to these outcomes and helping households achieve permanent stable housing. So just in terms of like a program type, I think just stressing the importance of those programs that provide assistance to households in actually receiving permanent housing are crucial. But it really, I mean, I think it's clear that we need all of our programs working together to have a really robust service system. You know, these are system level outcomes, so we don't, you know, we don't really differentiate. We know that clients will interact with a lot of different types of homeless services system as they kind of navigate the system and work to become housed. And so, you know, it can be hard to disentangle the effects of a stay at a shelter from, you know, the impact of an outreach worker, from, you know, the impact of the permanent housing program that they are able to be connected with as they move through the system. I know that's not an ideal answer.
No, that's an important perspective. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And these data briefs that I'm kind of previewing as to come as I settle more into this role and use our data more, will really focus on kind of very specific programs or looking at the impact of specific, you know, strategies. And so those will tell us more information as well.
Thank you very much.
Can Carrie, can you stop sharing?
Yes.
All right. Any more questions for Carrie before we let her go?
Yeah, Carrie, is there anything that you think that we as a board could improve upon, or anything that you think we can assist you with as it pertains to advocacy, or something to assist to streamline this process for things for you guys?
That's a great question. I really think just any support for our homeless service system is needed right now. From a data side, it's really important that the agencies that are being funded, as well as, you know, at the continuum of care level, that there's capacity there to really devote to making sure that the data that's being collected is and recorded is accurate and being used to the fullest extent possible. I mean, I just think it's clear from the data that we have that, you know, there's so much more work to be done in our community, both with increasing access to permanent housing opportunities and with really addressing those inequities that show up within our system. I also think that the more that bodies like this can kind of understand and turn to the data that's produced by our HMIS system, you know, the more informed that you all will be in making decisions. And so anything that I can do to support those efforts, any additional information that I can share with you, I'd be happy to do so.
All right, thank you. We'll definitely put you on the calendar to bring back next year, put it that way. Is there any additional questions before we let Carrie go and turn it back over to our chair, Tammy, to continue the meeting?
Just gratitude. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time and your knowledge.
Thank you. I've been really excited to be here and share this with you all. And yeah, please reach out if you have any additional questions. My contact information is in the PowerPoint, which I can make sure is shared with anyone who's interested.
Yeah, just send it to Ms. Marsman and she'll send it to the board members. And then we'll make sure we have this video and information. We'll work with our IT/web the division to assist with adding this information to our website, specifically underneath this platform.
Sounds great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
Yep,
Thank you.
you.
Bye.
Okay, so now we'll move to communications, staff updates, member reports. Are there any?
Chris, Sherilyn, anyone have any updates for the board? All right, no, none from the staff.
Thank you. Are there any citizens' comments?
There are no citizen comments at this time.
Thank you. So we'll move to adjournment.
Wait.
Wait a minute, Commissioner Cunningham. Yeah, Commissioner Cunningham had, I think, a question.
Yeah, well, I didn't have a question. I just want to say thank you all for your service. My journey to becoming an elected official started with this body and this board. And the importance of this board, it can't be stated. A lot of communities do not even allow for citizens to have this type of input and insight on these dollars that come into our communities. And so, again, thank you all to everyone who is currently serving, everyone who has served in the past, the city staff who support these opportunities. I just want to say I am honored to have served. This is my official last meeting as an elected official. And so I look forward to the journey and still supporting you guys as a citizen. And I hope you guys know I love everything that you do and everything you continue to do for our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cunningham.
Yes.
Commissioner
Thank you for your
Cunningham.
service to the community as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your service and your guidance while we've done our work at this committee, and also just your guidance and your voice for the city. I have really appreciated your leadership. So thank you for all of your hard work.
Well, I didn't burn it down, so.
And Madam Chair, I think it was real important. We all, as staff, think Commissioner Cunningham is involved in our other boards and committees that he's been involved with. He's been very not only helpful, but very informative on the community standpoint on things we need to provide to the community from the city. But I think one of his best statements was that he came from this board, this community engagement board, and we have other board members have graduated to the county, as our chair has done, in other areas of being commissioners for the city and the county. So that's just pretty much a marketing tool for myself and staff to the community. This board is very impactful in communication and information sharing for the city and to the residents. And so please, if you don't get involved with this board or committee, please look at other boards and committees with the city to be involved and be an impactful person in not only in the community, but your neighborhood as well. So I thank all our board members. I thank Commissioner Cunningham for being involved because he has made a difference, and you guys are making a difference every month as you make decisions going forward. So I thank you all.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? I'm sorry, Commissioner Cunningham. I was not thinking that this was your last meeting. We hope you'll come back and make some citizens' comments sometime or apply for the board because we have some openings.
That might come with some anger. I need some decompressing right now.
Yeah, just a minute, and then you got to come back. Well, thank you so much.
Again, it's my honor.
Okay, so if there's nothing further, we're adjourned.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You as well.
Too.